The Environment of Business, the Internal Environment, Unit 1, from Chapter 3, Lesson 2, Part 3.
The first dimension of the internal environment that we're going to discuss is corporate culture. And this can be defined as the set of key values, beliefs, understandings, and norms that members of an organization share. So remember that an organization is a social unit. And so what we often see when we think or talk about culture is that culture is to the organization like water is to a fish. What's unusual about it? It's just what the fish is used to. It's all it knows. It's the environment that it lives in, and that's often what culture becomes, invisible to the people that are members of that organization. But if we have to unpack it, there are certain things that we can look for. Are there symbols, the way things are done? When you start at a new company, for example, do they paint the office for you or give you a new laptop? Symbols that you're important to the organization. There are also stories that can create and perpetuate the culture. Think about My Way Insurance, where they're even using some of their stories in an advertising campaign of a lady that was in an accident and the call center agent that dispatched the vehicle to assist her, checking on her, phoning her at the hospital every month until she woke up out of a coma 8 months later. A story like that has a significant impact on how the company is perceived and also how members of that company perceive their role in the business. And that brings us to heroes. Are there certain people in the organization that just exemplify the character and the fabric of the organization? And this is often someone in a top leadership position. So how Steve Jobs is seen at Apple, for example, as just the epitome of creativity and innovation. There can also be certain slogans that just typify how the organization responds, how they, for example, are going to treat their employees or greet their customers. And there might be a slogan that just reminds everyone how to interact with them. And the last one that we look for is ceremonies that signify important milestones for the company. This could be an award ceremony at the end of the year, or in the case of Alibaba, we can in fact think about corporate culture like an iceberg. So above the surface of the ocean, there are certain things that are visible to almost anyone that would observe the culture. Is there a uniform that people have to wear? Is it an open layout that the office has? Are there certain slogans or ceremonies that are easily observable? And of course, that's the surface level of culture. What's actually quite interesting is what's invisible. So what is below the surface? What are the deeper values and shared understandings held by organization members? Is it perhaps that they care about one another as if they're a family? What are the things that you can only truly understand as a member of the organizational culture? We can categorize corporate culture according to two dimensions. What are the needs of the environment? Does it favor flexibility or stability? And where is the strategic focus of the organization? Is it internal or external? And if we use these two dimensions, then we can identify 4 predominant types of culture, although one company might have traits from more than one of these categories. The first would be an adaptability culture. So this would be a company that has a high focus externally in terms of their strategy, and also has to be tremendously flexible in terms of responding to the market. So they really focus on employees spotting, interpreting, and translating innovations and changes in the environment to something that is valuable for the company. Next, we'd have stability as a need of the environment and an external strategic focus, which would give us an achievement culture. Here, the managers are very focused on delivering value. It's very competitive, but these companies are also looking for employees that thrive in that sort of environment. Next, we can look at an involvement culture where there is a high need of flexibility, but the focus of the organization is internal. So they are more focused on keeping their employees happy. So their employees are the people that serve their customers, so happy employees, happy customers, and also responding to changes in the market. Four Seasons Hotel is a really famous example of a company that has an involvement culture. And then lastly, a consistency culture that favors stability in the environment and also has an internal strategic focus. So they're focused on making sure their employees aren't overworked and also on catering to very specific trends in the market. This can mean that they're not so fast in responding to changes, but also probably leads to greater satisfaction for employees. An important question that managers should be asking themselves is how to manage a high-performance culture. Because corporate culture plays such an important role in how employees respond to innovation, it's really key for managers to understand the role of culture. It has been seen that companies that pursue the bottom line and earnings above all else do end up being successful in the short run. But in the long term, they are eroding the very fabric that binds employees into the organization and motivates them to keep committed and keep working. So successful companies have to find a way to balance the culture and the performance that's required. And so we can see that culture really is the glue that can hold it all together. A successful high-performance culture is based on a solid organizational mission and purpose that employees buy into and agree on. It means that adaptive shared values have been developed in the organization, and these values underpin and guide all of the decisions and the way that everyone does business in the company. So if a company is getting this right, then they are balancing a focus on bottom line results and a cohesive culture that makes everyone feel part of the company's success. This matrix illustrates organizational outcomes based on the attention that managers pay to both cultural values and business results. The first dimension looks at the manager's attention to business performance, and the second, their attention to values. Now, quadrant A reflects what happens when there is a high focus on performance but a low focus on cultural values. In a situation where this culture is dominant, managers meet their performance goals, but they fail to uphold the cultural values of the organization. Quadrant B would probably be identified as the ideal, as we have high performance and high cultural values, which means that managers achieve the goals set in the organization, but they also uphold the desired cultural values, which creates a very cohesive culture. Quadrant C is probably the most undesirable, with both low business performance and low cultural values, meaning that neither goals nor values are upheld. And the last quadrant reflects low performance but high cultural values, which is also problematic as the business is not meeting performance goals, but they are managing to uphold cultural values. The best way to achieve a high-performing culture is through cultural leadership. And this is something that management has to undertake to do. They have to use signals and symbols to influence the right kind of corporate culture. That means they have to create a picture of the future. They have to articulate a vision of what the culture is going to be that employees want to be part of. And then they have to pay attention to the day-to-day activities. What's happening at grassroots level in the organization? And is it reinforcing the culture they are trying to build? They have to remember that everything they do is observed by employees. So if their words and actions are not reinforcing the culture they're trying to create, they will not be able to achieve a high-performing culture. We've discussed in this internal environmental section of the environment mostly the culture of the organization, but I'm sure you'll notice that we've referred to management and employees throughout, and you will see that we will talk about management and employees and how they play a role in the internal environment of business quite a lot in the coming units.